The day Nadia Reyes decided to wear white linen trousers to the Westbrook Community Pool was, by all meteorological accounts, the most perfect Saturday in June. 78 degrees. Not a cloud that meant anything. The kind of light that makes everyone look like a better version of themselves. She should have stayed home. Nadia was 24 years old and had spent most of those 24 years being the kind of person people described as fine. Fine-looking. Fine personality. Fine enough to invite to things, but not fine enough to be the reason for them. She worked the early shift at Bellamy's Copy and Print on Dearborn Street, which meant she was up at 5:15 every morning breathing toner fumes and making small talk with graduate students who never learned her name, but always remembered how she took their orders without being asked twice. She lived in a studio apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant. The walls smelled like faux broth year-round, which she had decided, 3 years in, to call cozy instead of depressing. She had one close friend, Priya Menon, who texted in all caps and laughed like a seal being tickled, and a rotating cast of acquaintances she saw at parties and always meant to call later. She never called later. The pool invite had come from Deja Morris, one of the rotating cast. Deja worked in PR, owned 3 Himalayan cats, and had the social energy of a person who had never once dreaded walking into a room. Her texts were invitations disguised as statements. Pool party Saturday. You're coming. To Velvet o'clock. Nadia had typed, I have plans, and then deleted it. She didn't have plans. She typed sounds great, smiley face, instead, and immediately felt the specific dread of a person who has committed to something social before their anxiety could mount a proper defense. Priya came to pick her up at 11:45 in a Civic that smelled like coconut air freshener and had 3 parking tickets in the cup holder. You look cute, Priya said, which was Priya's way of saying you look nervous. Please relax. Nadia looked at her own reflection in the sun visor mirror. White linen trousers. A coral bikini top under a white gauze cover-up. Hair in a high bun. 2 pieces escaping at the temples because they always did, because her hair had opinions. She looked fine. She looked exactly like a person who had tried. Thanks, she said, and flipped the visor up. The Westbrook Community Pool was technically a public facility, but had been colonized every summer by the same group of people who treated shared civic infrastructure like their personal resort. They arrived early with Bluetooth speakers and coolers. They claimed chairs. They established the invisible but fully enforced geometry of who sat where, and whether you were welcome in it. Deja's group occupied the far left corner near the diving board. 6 or 7 people. Mixed loud, already 3 drinks into the afternoon. Beautiful in the specific way of people who have never had to try very hard. Nadia recognized 2 of them. Vaguely. The kind of recognition that required no warmth. Deja waved her over with the enthusiasm of a person who was genuinely glad to see her, which Nadia appreciated and also immediately distrusted, because gladness that large usually came with something attached. Not. You made it. Deja hugged her like she'd returned from war. Okay, everyone, this is Nadia. She's hilarious. Trust me. The group looked at her. She was not, in that moment, hilarious. She was a woman holding a tote bag and smiling a smile that was doing more structural work than any smile should have to do. Hey, she said. General direction. Nobody specific. The afternoon started okay. She found a chair on the edge of the group's claimed territory. Priya settled in beside her, immediately comfortable in the way Priya was immediately comfortable everywhere. Feet up, sunglasses on, talking to the nearest stranger within 40 seconds. Nadia drank a hard lemonade she didn't really want and watched the pool. The water was that specific blue that only exists in chlorinated public pools. Not ocean blue, not sky blue, something more municipal, more fluorescent. Kids were shrieking at the shallow end. A man was doing laps with the grim determination of someone who had been told to do laps by a doctor. It was fine. She was fine. She started to actually relax. The lemonade kicking in, the sun doing its slow, soft thing on her shoulders, when she first heard Marcus tell her laugh. She didn't know his name was Marcus then. She just heard the laugh. It was the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep and uninvested. The laugh of a man who found something genuinely funny rather than performing amusement for an audience. It was across the pool. She looked. He was in the water, elbows up on the pool ledge, talking to someone on the deck. Tall from what she could tell. Broad. Jaw that did what jaws in movies were always trying to do, and never quite managing. She looked for 2 seconds. She looked away. She drank her lemonade. She did not look back because she was not the kind of person who looked back because looking back always led to being caught looking, and being caught looking led to the specific humiliation of a face she couldn't control. The trouble with Deja's gatherings, and Nadia would understand this fully only in retrospect, was that Deja curated chaos the way some people curated playlists. Carefully, with intention, with the full knowledge that discomfort in social situations was just entertainment that hadn't announced itself yet. It started with Marco. Marco was Deja's cousin. 22, loud, the human equivalent of a notification you couldn't silence. He had been doing increasingly theatrical dives off the board and had at some point in the last 30 minutes elevated his ambitions to include other people. Yo, who hasn't been in the pool yet? He pointed at the group, like a general conducting a census of cowards. Several people pointed at Nadia. She felt it before she saw it. The group's gaze, casual and collective, swinging to her corner. I'm good, she said. Not. Deja sat up. You literally haven't moved from that chair. I'm enjoying the chair. The chair will still be here. I've bonded with the chair. It understands me. People laughed. She had meant them to laugh, deflect with humor, escape the actual topic, but laughter was not escape when the person pursuing you was Marco, who interpreted amusement as agreement. Come on, he said, already moving toward her side of the pool. I'm serious, bro, just go, someone said, and that bro was aimed at her, casual and careless, the kind of thing people say when they decided you're being difficult. She stood up, because she always stood up, because the math of cause a scene versus just comply always landed the same way in her chest. The scene was too expensive, the compliance was survivable. She set down her lemonade. She stepped toward the pool. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Marco, who was 19% game theory and 81% impulse, decided that the running gag of the afternoon, was to pull people into the pool by their waistbands. He'd done it twice already, both times with guys who'd laughed and splashed back. He did not think, even briefly, about the difference. His hands caught the waistband of her white linen trousers, both hands two-fisted, and pulled. The trousers went down. Not all the way. She grabbed them. She grabbed them with both hands, the tote bag she'd somehow still been holding hitting the deck, the hard lemonade in her stomach going ice cold, her vision tunneling to the concrete under her feet. But down far enough, down to the curve of her hip, down to where the elastic of her bikini bottom sat, down to the lower left of her back, where the skin stopped being just skin. The mark had been there since she was 19. Not a tattoo, not a birthmark, though she called it that once to a boyfriend who'd asked because birthmark was the answer that ended questions. It was a scar, shaped like nothing specific, about 3 inches across, slightly raised, the kind of scar that only forms when a wound has taken a long time to close. She had never shown it to anyone who hadn't already been close enough to find it on their own. Marco stopped. He stopped the way a person stops when they've reached for what they expected to be a light switch, and touched something living instead. His hands were still loosely at her waistband. He was staring at the scar. She felt him staring. She could not move. The group had gone from laughing, mid-laugh, teeth still showing, the sound dying in their throats, to silent. That particular silence that isn't quiet at all, that's made of every question nobody's asking. Priya was on her feet. Nadia didn't see it. She felt it. Marco let go. He took 1 step back, then another, then he turned and got into the pool without a word. Not a jump, not a dive, just a quiet lowering of himself into the water like a man who needed to be somewhere else immediately. Nadia pulled her trousers up. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. That her hands were steady. That the part of her body that could be seen was holding absolutely still while every interior thing was screaming. She picked up the tote bag. She sat back down in the chair. Nobody said anything. The man doing laps was still doing laps. The kids were still shrieking. The Bluetooth speaker was playing something with too much bass. Everything continued. The whole world just continuing. She stared at the pool and thought about how blue it was. Not ocean blue. Not sky blue. Something more like hell breath. Nadia knew because she was watching the clock on her phone, which she was holding in both hands, not because she needed it, but because her hands needed something to be responsible for. 11 minutes of Priya sitting beside her in the chair she dragged over, close enough that their shoulders touched, not saying a word. Just there, warm and solid and smelling like coconut sunscreen and the specific loyalty of a person who knows when silence is the only thing that helps. On the 12th minute, Priya said, "Do you want to leave?" Nadia considered it. She considered yes, the relief of it, the clean animal logic of removing yourself from the thing that hurt you. She considered no, the way leaving would make the moment permanent, would make it the thing that ended the afternoon, the thing people remembered when they remembered her. She said, "Not yet." Priya nodded. She didn't ask why. Didn't ask, "Are you sure?" Just nodded and reached into the cooler beside them and produced a second hard lemonade she handed to Nadia without comment. Nadia took it. She did not drink it immediately. She held it. The condensation on the can was real and cold and belonged to the present, and that was enough. Deja came over 20 minutes later. She crouched down in front of Nadia's chair, actually crouched, knees on the concrete, which was a physical gesture Nadia cataloged and kept, and said nothing for a moment. Then, "Marco's an idiot." "I am sorry." "It's fine," Nadia said. "It's not, though." The words sat between them like something breakable. "No," Nadia agreed. "It's not." Deja put a hand on her knee briefly, the lightest contact permission-seeking before it arrived, and then stood up. She went back to the group. Nadia watched her say something to them, low and pointed, and watched three of them glance toward Marco in the pool with a specific look of social correction being issued. Marco did not look at Nadia. She appreciated that more than she'd expected. The afternoon continued the way afternoons do when they've survived something that nearly wasn't survivable. Unevenly, a little carefully, with pockets of normalcy that felt earned. People swam. Music played. Someone brought out a watermelon and cut it badly, resulting in 17 pieces of varying geometry. And somehow this was very funny. Nadia laughed at the watermelon. The laugh surprised her. Real laugh, sharp and genuine, the kind that arrives before you've invited it. She was still laughing when she became aware that the man from the pool was standing at the drink cooler approximately 3 feet to her left. He was taller out of the water. That was her first thought. The kind of observation a person makes when they're trying not to make the observation they're actually making, which was that he was looking at her, not staring, not the invasive, sustained kind, but the kind of looking that has direction to it. Intent without demand. He had a soda can and a paper plate with 2 uneven pieces of watermelon on it. He glanced at the plate. At her. Back at the plate. "Structural integrity is a myth, apparently," he said. She looked at the plate. "Tragic," she said. "Memorial worthy, I think." She looked up at him then. The thing about his face, and she would spend considerable time later trying to articulate this to Priya, and failing, was that it had the quality of something that hadn't been optimized. Not a face assembled for maximum impact. A face that had happened, over time, through some combination of genetics and outdoor living and whatever it looks like when a person has mostly been okay with who they are. The jaw was real. The eyes were brown, so dark they went near black in the afternoon light, and they had the slight downward angle at the corners that made a person look, not sad, exactly, like they'd thought about sadness and come out the other side with something better. She was doing the thing she'd told herself she wasn't going to do. She looked at her lemonade. "I'm Marcus," he said. "Nadia." He sat down in the empty chair beside her. Not Priya's. She'd gone to get food, and balanced the plate on his knee with the careful attention of a man solving an engineering problem. One of the watermelon pieces slid toward the edge. "Don't," he advised it. The piece did not comply. He caught it. Barely. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had just defeated physics through willpower alone. She laughed again. That second real laugh of the afternoon. He was a friend of Deja's through her older brother. He lived in Pilsen, worked in urban forestry, which meant he planted trees, he explained, but with paperwork. "Bureaucratic trees," she said. "The most important trees. Nobody plants an arbitrary tree. Every tree has a permit. That seems sad for the tree. The tree doesn't know." She considered this. The tree might know. He looked at her sideways, like she'd said something worth turning toward. Not a challenge, more like recalibration. They talked about trees for a while. Then, about the copy shop, which he'd been to, not Bellamy's, but one on Michigan, which she assured him was inferior in every measurable way with a confidence she did not entirely have authority to claim. He let her claim it anyway. She noticed that, the way he let things land without immediately redirecting them back to himself. The way he asked questions that were actually questions, not setups for a point he was planning to make. The watermelon plate sat between them, and he kept offering her pieces, and she kept taking them, and the afternoon light shifted the way it does after 4 o'clock, going from white-hot to something golden and longer. Priya came back. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Nadia. She looked at the watermelon plate. "I'm Priya," she said, sitting down. "I come in peace." "Marcus, what are we talking about?" "Trees," said Nadia. Priya looked at Nadia with the expression of a woman who had been told trees, and heard something else entirely. The eyes slightly wider, mouth slightly closed look that minnow. "We're having a debrief about this later. I'll be thorough and relentless." "Trees," Priya said pleasantly. "Great. The thing about sitting in a chair, talking to someone for 2 hours, is that the world forgets to watch you." The afternoon found its rhythm around them. People swam. Marco surfaced from the pool at some point, got a plate of food, disappeared into a conversation on the other side of the deck. The sun moved. The Bluetooth speaker cycled through 3 separate moods. And Nadia sat in her chair, trousers dried now, hair starting to lose its battle with the humidity, and she talked to Marcus Teller about trees and copy shops and the exact correct way to eat watermelon. No seeds, no salt, no moral gray area, and she did not think for stretches of time that kept getting longer about the moment with Marco, which was something, which was actually everything, but it was still in her. She could feel it the way you feel a splinter you haven't found yet. Not pain exactly, more like the awareness that something foreign is lodged somewhere specific and will make itself known when you're not ready. At some point, Marcus said something funny. She couldn't remember later what it was, only that it was the kind of funny that caught her off guard, the kind that gets past your defenses because your defenses are looking somewhere else. And she laughed, and in laughing she moved, and her cover-up slipped off her shoulder, and she reached up to fix it, and that motion, arm raised, torso twisted slightly, pulled the fabric across her back. She felt the air on the scar. Not exposed, just present. That specific awareness. She fixed the cover up. Marcus had not moved. He was looking at the pool, still smiling at whatever he'd said, not having noticed, or having noticed, and choosing with the same quiet deliberateness he seemed to apply to most things not to make a moment. She exhaled, slow, into the afternoon, into the golden light. He didn't know what the scar was. He hadn't seen it. He didn't need to know what it was. Not today, not in this chair, not with a paper plate and watermelon and the manufactured easy intimacy of Saturday afternoon that had decided, late in the day, to repair itself. But sitting there with him, in a light that had gone gentle, she thought about it anyway. She thought about being 19 and the thing that happened when she was 19 and the way the body marks the things you try to leave behind. Not punishment, not memory, just evidence that you survived something solid enough to leave a trace. She thought, I'm still here. And then, because she had practice at this, she looked at the pool, the municipal blue, the hell breath. She let out. Marcus said at some point, not the last thing he said, but close to it, "You've got a good laugh, you know? Like it surprises you every time." She looked at him. He was not performing the observation, not offering it to receive something back. He had just said it, plainly, the way you name a color. "It does," she said. "Why?" She thought about it. "Most things I expect to feel bad," she said. "Good ones still catch me." He looked at her for a moment. That same recalibrating look. He didn't say that makes sense, which would have been kind, but wrong. He didn't say you should expect better things, which would have been worse. He said, that's honest. And somehow that was exactly right. They exchanged numbers before she left. His idea, stated without performance. "I'd want to continue the tree discourse somewhere that is better watermelon." She said she'd consider it. She considered it before she'd finished saying it. Walking to Priya's car, Priya was vibrating with the effort of containment. For seconds, Nadia said, "I've been good." Priya said, "You've been incandescent. I have opinions. Save them. I have many opinions." Priya, Priya made the sound of a person physically suppressing commentary. Then the tree discourse. He said the tree discourse. I know. That's Nadia. That's I know. Priya grabbed her hand. They walked to the car. The evening had gone soft and orange, and the parking lot smelled like cut grass and something frying somewhere distant. And Nadia held her phone in her hand with Marcus's number in it and thought. Not because she didn't want to. She had drafted 4 texts in 5 days, ranging from casual to what is wrong with me, each of which she had deleted, but because she had a rule about not texting first that was less a rule and more a scar, which was a thing she was beginning to notice she had. Several of. He texted on Wednesday. Found a watermelon place. No structured figures. Yield is 100%. She read it in the copy shop between a graduate student's thesis bindery and a man who needed 47 color copies of a flyer for his missing cat. Orange tabby. Answers to Gerald, possibly cross with the neighbors. She read it twice. She wrote back. Define yield. He wrote, pieces per watermelon. Peer-reviewed. She was smiling. At the toner Senate counter. At 7:42 in the morning. She texted Priya. He wants to get watermelon. Priya responded in 7 seconds with a sound effect she had somehow converted to text. They met on a Thursday evening, which was not a date night, but was better. A Thursday had the energy of a thing that could be anything, a thing that hadn't been preloaded with expectation. The place was a small ad market on Cermak that had a produce section in the back with a woman who cut fruit to order. Not a restaurant, not a bar. A place where the lighting was fluorescent, and the floor was slightly sticky, and 3 different generations of the same family were shopping at the same time. Nadia liked it immediately. She liked that he'd picked it, that he'd found the unsentimental version of romance. Not the version that tried, the version that just was. He was there when she arrived, already talking to the woman behind the fruit counter in partial Spanish that the woman was correcting cheerfully with the energy of a person who has been correcting people's Spanish her whole life and remains unbothered by how long it's taking. He introduced Nadia. The woman handed her a slice of watermelon before she'd asked for anything. Test piece, the woman said. Nadia ate it. It was genuinely extraordinary. Okay, she said. Marcus looked pleased in the low-key way of a person whose predictions routinely come true, but who has learned not to crow about it. Told you. You didn't tell me it would be this good. Undersell, he said. Keeps expectations calibrated. She looked at him. He looked back. The fruit counter woman cut another slice and handed it to Marcus without commentary. They walked. Not a planned walk. Just the natural extension of being in motion, of not wanting to stop talking. They went east toward the lake, not because either of them decided to, but because the city tilted that way, and they tilted with it. He talked about the tree project he was managing in Englewood, a neighborhood re-canopy initiative, which was a phrase that sounded bureaucratic and hid inside it something genuinely loving. He was putting trees where there hadn't been trees, on blocks where people walked in the August heat without shade, on corners where kids waited for buses with no cover. Most people don't notice them going in, he said. But 5 years from now, those kids waiting for the bus, they'll have shade, she said. They'll have shade. He was quiet a beat. That's the whole thing. You work for 5 years from now. She thought about this. She thought about 5 years from now as a concept. The way it had not always felt available to her. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way she could have explained to someone who hadn't lived in a version of the present that felt unsteady. Just 5 years from now had once been a direction she didn't look. I like that, she said. The shade. The working for something you won't immediately see. He looked at her sideways. The recalibrating look. She was getting familiar with it. It meant, this person just said something I want to keep. They got to the lakefront, and the light was doing the 9 p.m. thing. Not dark, not sunset, something suspended. The water was large and gray-green and made everything feel appropriately small. They sat on the concrete embankment, legs over the edge. The city behind them, the lake ahead of them. An elderly man 30 feet down was fishing with the concentration of someone who had already caught everything he needed and was here for something else. For a while they talked about nothing in particular, the way conversation does when it's found its register and doesn't need to prove anything. His sister in Memphis, her terrible first apartment, the one before the faux Senate studio, which had had a radiator that communicated exclusively through sound effects that suggested a dying percussion instrument. The three things she'd told herself she'd learned to cook before 30 and had not yet started. How old are you? 24. You have time. 6 years isn't much if you're planning to start at 29 and a half. He laughed, the one she'd heard across the pool, deeper up close. She cataloged it the way she cataloged things she wanted to keep. The pause came naturally, not uncomfortable, the kind that arrives between people when the words have been enough for a while. She was looking at the water. He said, quietly, not as a question, the scar. She went still, not flinching still, more like the stillness of the moment before you decide something. Yeah, she said. He didn't ask what it was. Didn't ask if she was okay. Didn't do the things some people did. The tilt of the head, the careful lowering of the voice that performed concern while actually requesting information. He just acknowledged it existed, with one word, and waited. She'd been in this moment before a few times. With a boyfriend who'd called it a birthmark after she said birthmark. With a roommate in college who'd seen it once and never mentioned it again out of what Nadia chose to interpret as kindness and might have been discomfort. With Priya, who had sat with her in an ER waiting room 5 years ago and held her hand and never once framed it as a story to understand rather than a person to be with. She looked at the lake. I was 19, she said. There was a situation, a person, something that got bad before I understood it was bad. She stopped. He didn't fill the pause. I got out, she said. I got out, and I got the scar, and then I got a studio apartment that smells like pho, and a job that smells like toner, and a friend who responds to texts in under 10 seconds. A beat, and occasionally someone tries to pants me at a pool party, and sees the evidence. She'd meant it to land like a joke. Like the humor register she reached for when things got too exposed. She heard herself say it and felt, with some detachment, that it had not landed like a joke. It had landed like the truth wearing a joke's clothes. Marcus was quiet. Then, today was the first time you'd been to something like that in a while? She thought about it. Yeah, she said. More or less. You stayed, he said. I did. Even after. She looked at him. Even after, she said. He nodded. Not like he was proud of her, which she would have not known how to receive. More like, that's information about who you are, and I'm keeping it. The mark, he said. Marco saw it, and he stopped, she said. Yeah. She exhaled. I don't know what he saw. I don't know what he thought. But she paused. She'd been trying to articulate this for 5 days since it happened, cycling through interpretations of the moment. Violation, yes. But also, something else that she hadn't named. For 1 second, she said slowly, the scar did what I couldn't do. It stopped things. It held a line I wasn't able to hold on my own, with just, she gestured at herself, just being me, and I don't know how to feel about that. Whether it's terrible or whether it's. She stopped. Whether it's something, Marcus said. Yeah. The fishing man had packed up and left without her noticing. They were mostly alone on this stretch now. The water was doing its gray-green thing. A plane moved soundlessly overhead. Bodies remember things, he said. Mine does. Took a bad fall off a roof 3 years ago. Just a few feet, nothing serious, but every time I'm on a ladder now my hand get cold. Doesn't matter that I know I'm fine. She looked at him. Body keeps the receipt, he said. Body keeps the receipt. She turned that over. Yeah, she said. Exactly that. They walked back toward the neighborhood at 10:30. The city had gone into its nighttime mode. Louder in some places, quieter in others, the specific variable noise of city that never entirely sleeps, but does put on different clothes. At the corner of Cermak and a street she didn't have memorized yet, he stopped. This is me, he said, indicating roughly north. That's me, she said, indicating roughly somewhere else. He had his hands in his pockets. She had her hands in her jacket pockets because the night had gotten cooler, the lake sending its cold breath inland. The tree discourse, he said. I think it continues. I think that depends on the quality of the next fruit stand. I'll vet it personally. Peer-reviewed, she said. Peer-reviewed, he confirmed. He smiled. She smiled. They were both aware this was the moment. The accounting of what the evening had been, the decision about what came next, and they were both aware enough not to push it past what it was. Text me, she said. You could text me, he said. Not a challenge. An observation. The kind that came from someone who'd noticed things. I have a thing, she said, about texting first. That's a 5 years ago thing, he said. Quiet, not accusing. She went still again. He met her eyes. You said you got out, he said. That's a past tense thing. Texting first can be a present tense thing. She thought about it. She thought about the 5 texts she drafted and deleted, about the way her hands had gone to her pockets outside the fruit market and stayed there, protecting something that might not need protecting anymore. About 5 years from now, the shade you work toward and can't see yet. Good night, Marcus, she said. He smiled. Good night, Nadia. She walked 3 blocks. She took out her phone. She texted, I'm texting first. Noted. His response came in 45 seconds. Noted. Filed. Peer reviewed. She stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant that gave her apartment its scent. The faux steam drifting up from the ventilation grated her feet, warm against the night air. She laughed. Not the performance laugh. Not the deflect with humor laugh. The one that surprised her. She did not call the scar beautiful. She did not call it strength or empowerment or any of the language people reached for when they wanted to make peace with the evidence of things that should not have happened. She was not interested in that story. The scar was just there, like the studio apartment, like the toner, like the way she'd stayed in the chair and watched the pool go blue and felt the afternoon try to collapse and held it with her hands and her silence and the quiet animal stubbornness of a person who had decided at some point to keep staying. She went inside. She heated water for tea. She sat on the edge of her bed in the apartment that smelled like someone else's comfort food, in a city planting trees on corners no one would photograph. And she held the mug in both hands, and she thought, not about the pool, not about Marco's hands, or the cold air on her back, or the silence that had fallen through the group like a stone through water. She thought about the fishing man who'd been there for something other than the fish, about shade that would exist in 5 years on a corner she'd never walked down, about the laugh that kept surprising her, arriving ahead of permission, refusing to wait. She thought, the body keeps the receipt. And then she thought, but it also keeps everything else. The watermelon, the 9 p.m. light, the tree man saying that's honest like honesty was a currency he'd been saving for something worth spending it on.